let's get started. So a little bit about me. I am the technology evangelist of JBoss. I'm doing a lot of integration projects in Asia. I'm dealing with like HTC and TSMC and all these people. We did a lot of integrations with different vendors. So that's about me. So nothing interesting. But OK, so what are we doing today? We're going to talk about what Camel is, and we're going to solve integration problem with Camel. And then we're going to talk a little bit about JBoss Fuse, because we want to run Camel in some kind of environment. So JBoss Fuse is the product I'm going to use to deploy our Camel application on top of that. So what is Camel? Well, to me, Camel is a framework that is going to help you to solve a complex integration problems. So, you can use Camel to achieve more modularized integration and make it easier to manage. So instead of the developers does all heavy liftings, doing all the codings and stuff, Camel can help you. So as a developer, you could imagine yourself as a writer or commander of the Camel. You're actually writing it. So what do you do with Camel? So what you have to do is point out the routes or point out the way for the Camel to walk or to go from one of the source to a target destination. So this is what you do. So as a Camel developer, we often call it writing Camel. So we're actually directing Camel to do all the things that we want for them. So what about heavy lifting? What do I mean by heavy lifting? So traditionally, as a developer, if you want to actually do integration to solve integration problems by having a file from a file directory, and then reading this file and assume this file is XML file, right? So we have to parse this XML file with JAXB or XSLT, those kind of technology to parse this into a POJO. And then, so this is what I need to write. So first of all, I need to have a file reader that's going to do the read lines and things like that, all those kind of things here. Then we're going to use a JXB, which is going to parse your content. And then we're going to put this message into a messaging queue. And then you have to implement the JMS part and everything. That's everything that you have to write. And then you do your actual business logic of this current content. So this is what you have to do as a developer. And doing this is it's a lot of work. And you have to do it repetitively if you're doing a complex integration problem, right? So other than that, connecting all this application together, it's going to be very complex after a few months or a few years after your application product has begun to grow. And then the next person come in, and they will have trouble reading your code. And they would say, OK, this is rubbish. I'm going to rewrite things again. So he's doing the repetitive things again and again. So what Camel does, it has all these components. So the components actually release you from the repetitive work of having to write all the different connection code, connector code that you are trying to connect to different sources. So like activemq, if you want to have like a message broker, you can have this component to connect to the actual messaging MQ. Or if you want to write a database, you don't have to write the JDBC code again. You could just simply use these SQL components in Camel, and then it's going to do the hard work for you. And same as all SFTPs and giving out web services using CXF or servlet or using Jetty or EJB. And we even do social networkings and enterprise application as well. And imagine in Camel, we have 150 of those components. So it actually covers most of your needs for integration projects. So this is, I'm not sure why it's not picking up the entire screen, so sorry about that. But this is the route you point to your Camel. This is what you tell your Camel to do. So you actually draw out a route. So this is called a route in Camel. And within this route, you will have several endpoints. So the endpoints are the point of contact with the outside world. So in this part, I'm actually reading in, where's my mouse? So in this part, I'm actually reading in information from either one of this. So you could place all the different components in different endpoints. and I can actually expose information out to different endpoints as well. So it's actually like playing with Lego. So you could actually stack your different routes together instead of just, having it code, and it's very hard to read. And so in this, it's easier to read. So in each camel route, you would have different things that you need to know. So the route, the place that it's going to read information in, we call it a consumer. So the consumer actually reads information and get the data as input. And then we have something called producer. So producer is the components that is actually doing the output. So in one route, you would have a consumer, and then you'd have a producer. So within, in between consumer and producer, you would have something called a processor. So what this processor do is you could inject anything inside. You could have a data validation, or you could do business rule or data transformation within these intermediate processors. So with validations, you could either write your own code. So the beauty of Camel is that it is really, really easy to customize. All you have to do is write yourself a POJO, and that POJO implement something called a processor. It's called Camel processor, and then it's going to, if you inherit that processor, then you have to inherit a method, right? And that method gives you the access to the messages that is flowing through the routes. So you could play around with that and manipulate the content inside your messages, okay? And as well as that, you could do, because within integration, it's often that we need to transform our data from one to the other. So inside Camel, we have several data types that is already built in from, say, like from XML to JSON or JSON to a POJO. It's all built in, so you don't have to, do all the hard works. So how about configuring one of the components? So this is the things that you will see in Camel context. This is what you do. So to configure a component, all you have to do is use this kind of URL. So the URL is actually broken into 3 different parts. The first part is the component. So this time I'm actually using a FTP, but you could replace it with AMQ or SQL or infinite span or whatever you're using for the components. And then this is the actual configurations. So these are often the mandatory configurations that you need to give for these components. So for example, for this one, it's having to access a FTP, right? So you probably need to give it like a username, and you probably need to tell it where the IP is and the port of the FTPs, right? And the last part of this URL is the parameters. So these parameters are more like the optional parameters of Camel. So these are optional, these are mandatory, and that's the component name. And after that, you don't have to write any code anymore. All you have to do is just give this URL, and it's going to this IP and actually pick up information from that FTP. Okay? And the other good thing about Camel is about the integration pattern. Because there is no one-size-fits-all solutions. There's no way, right? Because every integration problems are complex and different. And to make sure that we always have our job, so it's even the best solution changes over time because the requirement change and the situation even the environment change. So your integration system probably have to grow with your have to grow as the time goes, right? And then you probably have to deal with like asynchronous messagings, right? Because we want to make sure that it's buffered, and we don't want to have a bottleneck inside our integration system. So with all that, we have a book called Enterprise Integration Pattern. That book is very similar to like the normal design patterns while we do our normal programming, right? So that's a bunch of people that they have been doing integration project for a long time, and they actually discover some of the patterns that you would bump into when you're developing an integration system. So they actually collect all these patterns and they put it into a book. So what they think is that when you're actually dealing with the data, you probably need to do some kind of routing based on the content. Or you probably need to, maybe here are just some examples of the patterns. So they kind of figure out that, you probably sometimes you have to aggregate some of the messages that you receive, and then you have to put them together and then send them out. Or sometimes you need to split them out. And sometimes the timing of you to receive your messages is different. Sometimes it's event-based. Sometimes it's, you have to pull it for like every hour or every day, something like that. Sometimes you have to filter your messages because you might need to hide some personal information before you send it out. So those kind of things that you will probably find is very essential for doing an integration system. So all that, Camel actually contains it. So you don't have to code it on your actual application. So with Camel, this is with this route, we actually implemented something called content switch. So it actually based on your content and actually so based on content, it sends your message to a different route. So this is called a EIP, and it is very useful, believe me. And inside Camel, we use JBoss Developer Studio to actually develop our applications. And you have a choice of having many different domain-specific languages. So you have a choice of using Blueprint XML or Java DSL or Spring, or if you like, you can use Ruby or Scala. So it's up to you. But I'll be sticking with Blueprint because I'm most familiar with that. And JBoss Views does support Blueprint. Okay? So I need to talk, before we go in and actually do a demo, I want to talk a little bit about Maven and Camel. Because to develop a proper Camel application, Maven actually makes your life easier. So why is it making my life easier? Okay, so first of all, it actually, using the Maven archetype, it actually creates a project for you. So it actually creates all the folder structures. So you don't have to worry about, where should I put my Camel context and where should I put my resource. It's going to create the all project structures for you. And then you have the dependencies. Because in Camel, we want to make sure that everything is lightweight. We don't want to have a whole package or bundle of jars that is going to be on top of our application server or our containers, right? So we want to make sure that all the dependencies are needed. So we're using the Maven dependencies to make sure that it's working and like that. And the other thing is when we want to actually package or upload or deploy our project onto a container, there is a plugin that I can use to do that. So we could use the Maven plugins to do the compile and do the upload and do the deploys as well. So to show you, I'm going to create a new application. So to create a new application, this is my JBoss Developer Studio. So I'm going to create a new project. I'm going to call it DevNation. Within this DevNation project, I'm going to choose a different archetype. So this is where I talk about creating, using archetype to create a project for me. So yep, I'm going to call it DevNation. And then it's going to create a DevNation project. And inside this DevNation project, you'll see all the folders needed to run a Camel application. And here, it even actually creates a sample ones for you, so you could actually play around and see how it works. And inside this pom.xml file, so this is what we need from Maven. It actually gathers all the needed dependencies for you. And then it actually it adds all the plugins you need to compile and to package your Camel applications. So to run this application, it's really easy to run. Just run like this. Run as Camel context. And then you have a standalone Camel running. Okay, so now we go back to see what is actually going on going on in this camel route, it's actually doing nothing. It's actually, it's doing a looping every 5 seconds, and then it's going to set a header saying hello and the times, and then it's going to log. So you will see the logs are actually logging the times and dates and like that, things like that, okay? So this is just one simple Camel application, but this is just too simple, so we're not going to use this one. We'll delete it. Okay, so let's go back to our presentation. So that's Maven. So what about what is actually running the routes that I'm doing? So it's actually the Camel Engine. So the Camel Engine takes in your route. So that's how I actually play with it. With the Camel Run, when I press Run with, it's actually calling out this engine, and the engine actually reads your routes and start doing the actual message in and message out. So what happened is, depending on your, depends on your Camel endpoint. It's actually either reading information in, or it's going to start an event. So for our case, it's starting an event. And then it's going to put something out, and then your message goes out. So for example, in our Camel, this is one of the examples, Camel route examples. And here you'll see that this is one single route. And inside this route, you would have a consumer, which consumes a file from data file. And then what it does is it's going to have what we call a EIP, Enterprise Integration Pattern. And this integration pattern is the context switch one. Because inside, we see that it's a choice. So when something happens, so this one is using an XPath library of XML, and it's reading an XML file and determine if the info type of customer data is : customer. If it is : customer, then it is going to send the information or the messages into a messaging queue called customer. Or otherwise, it is going to something called house. So this is how you read a XML file. Okay? So now we're going into our actual home loan application. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to read informations, from a vendor. Assume I'm a financial company. Okay, I'm actually reading. I'm actually doing a home loan appraisal for a vendor, and the vendor is going to give me 2 files: one XML file about the customer, and the other one is about the house. Okay, so after receiving all this XML file, I'm going to call out and actually gets appraisal, depending on the location of this house. So, location is everything. So for me, the way I decide how much my house costs is, find out how many schools are around my house. The more the school, the better the house is. So I'm actually charging more for more schools. Then I'm actually giving back to the customers and let the vendor knows that, okay, now how much your house is really worth. Okay, so this is what this application is about. And so let's take a look at this application. So because there's a big trend of doing microservices, right? So microservices is all about doing single task in one single application and in a single running instance. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to divide my application into small bits and pieces and deploy them on different containers, so they are distributed in a different way. And so I have actually break it down into few XML file or few camel routes. So the first camel routes that I did is the examples I showed you before, which is reading information in from a file directory, and then having this EIP, which is called content switch. So based on the switch, it's sending into different messaging queue. So you've seen the XML part, and this is the GUI. Okay. So how do you see the GUI? How do we go back to the source code? So this is our source code. And there's one thing I need to tell you before we begin, because this is the camel routes, but you probably need to do some kind of settings. Say, because I'm reading my information from activemq, right? But I need to know where the activemq is. So here it tells you, okay, my activemq is at localhost 61616, okay? And you have to give it a ID and password. So here, this is where I set everything up. And then here, this is where the actual camel route is. And within that XML file, I have a camel context. So within this camel context, I can have multiple routes, but I'm only having one, in this application. So this application reads information in and put it into messaging broker. So what to do next? So the next thing I want to do is I need to store my information into a customer database. So it's stored somewhere. So whenever I need it, I can get it out from my database. So here, I'm going to actually read the XML file in and then put it into database. So how do I do that? So here, okay. So now I'm actually going to do a camel route here. So here inside this this canvas, on the right-hand side is where all the components are. So depending on all the components that you need, we have a list of them, so you could choose whatever components that you need. So in this case, we're using the activemq. And I think you are very lucky, because before the 6.1 is released yesterday, we don't have this kind of GUI. We have to code like the entire URI in the previous version. But in this version, we have an advanced tab here that is going to tell you what to insert. So it's much easier. Before that, we have to go back to the Camel, the Camel documentations and find out, what is actually available on this component. But now we don't. So that's a good thing. So here, I'm just going to type in the destination of the queue I'm going to receive my contents from. So I'm going to do a customer. I'm going to read the information from customer queue, right? So what happens after that? Because we are reading an XML file, but I want to make sure that they are in, I want to access them with POJO. So I want to do some kind of transformation. So before the transformation, we have, before this 6.2 versions has been released, we have a lot of different built-in versions, but they never allow you to do any sort of like drag and drop mapping. But in 6.2, we have introduced something called a data transformation one. So once you get it, it's going to actually let you drag and drop and do the mappings for you. So we're going to give it an ID. So I'm going to class info. And because we're reading from an XML file, and we want to turn it into a Java file, Java POJO, okay? Class info already exists. Okay. So here, I'm going to choose what kind. I have to, let the, what is it called? The transformation tools to know, what kind of schema, what kind of, XML, what it's supposed to look like. So you have a choice of having a schema or instant documentations. But here I already have the schema, so I'm just going to choose my schema. And then I'm going to, turn it into a class. And because I already have a class, I'm just going to call it a customer info class. That's already here somewhere. Then finish. Then I have a drag and drop. So the actual POJO, is here. This I have already defined. Okay?
You won't generate it for you from the XML?
Actually, no, this is not from, the question was, is this formatted by the XML? No, this is the XML I have done before. So I want this XML to map into my POJO. What was it? It can be what?
Can the POJO be generated
No, actually, no. Well, yes, they did actually generate a custom info. So that's for your JXB. It did. But the thing is, I want to actually produce my own custom info so I can play around with that. Okay? Yes. So here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to map my XML into my Pojo. So what I do is I'm going to drag and drop. And because this is a demo, I don't want to make things more difficult. So I'm just going to straight match all of them. But I know your question is like, this is FAQ. So what happens if you have collections, right? Collections of objects. So what you do is you use the split patterns in EIP. So the EIP is going to split your data file into small bits and pieces, and then you do the actual mapping on, after you split your content, and then put them together back into a map or a collection. Okay, so that's how you do it. Okay, now I saved it. I have actually mapped my messaging queue into a transformation. Then what happens is I'm going to actually store information into a database, right? So I'll probably need SQL. So to make things easier, I've already done it. So, so here, I have actually set up a data source that is talking to my H2 database inside my application. And then I have assigned this data source into my SQL components. I don't trust demo God, so I'm helping myself here. And then what I did is I have a property placeholder, which is actually reading in a SQL properties. And this SQL properties is here. It contains all the SQLs I need to do the insert and delete and updates. Okay? So inside this insert, delete, and update, what I'm doing is I'm inserting the values from the body. And here, did you see this, this $, bracket thing here? This is called a simple expression. But to be like more precise, it's actually more like a Camel expression language, specifically for Camel. So it actually points to the body of the message, which is a Pojo, and then it gets the parameters inside your Pojo. So it's national IDs, first name. So I'm actually insert everything, in this SQL. I'm going to copy this. So after that, go back to our designer. I am going to add a SQL. Where is SQL? SSS. Okay, and inside SQL, I can put my queries down. Normally, you will probably put like this normal SQL file, right? SQL statement here. But because we've already placed it into my properties, all I have to do is using the Camel expression, I'm going to call the property inside my SQL file, my SQL property files. Okay, I'll use that, and then I'm done. That's one thing going. So to make sure that works, what I can do is I can start running this application. And hopefully nothing goes wrong. And before we start, I want to delete all the informations inside the house and customer info. Okay, then let's come back to the integration view.
Christina, what container is that when you're running it, run as application? What container is that running in?
That is a local Camel Java instance. It doesn't have a container. It just runs a locally standalone Java instance. Okay, so now it started. And because we're reading information from messaging queue, right? We want to send our message through a messaging queue. And luckily, I have a messaging queue already started. It's here. You will see I have a customer. I can start sending it. I can send an XML file in. Where should I find my XML file? And then I'm going to send my XML file message. And here, you see it's running. So let's go back and select our database. And ta-da, you see John, which is spelled wrong, and Doe. Okay, so this is what we did. So we actually started a camel route that actually reads information in and get it running. Okay, so now let's go back to the application. I hope I still have enough time. Yep. Okay, so rush it a little bit, but it should be okay. And I want to show you the Presto part. This part, I don't want to do it on stage because I'm afraid that something might go wrong, and I have a lot of typo issues. So I don't want to do this on stage, but here. This project has been broken down into 3 different routes. So inside this, you will see 3 different routes. I'll make it easier for you to show. Let me find my Windows. Pen perspective, pen view. Yep. So here you see there are 3 different routes. 1, 2, 3, 3 different routes, right? So all these routes does different things. The first one is the biggest one that is actually combining these 2, the location and the school camel routes. The most interesting part is the school one, or let's get the location one first. So if you look at the location one, Here, the most interesting part, the interesting part is this one, because this is where I'm actually calling out to Google API. And the Google API actually gives me back the locations of address I've given it. So if you take a look at the property of this particular component, where is it? Where is my property? Here. You will see that I'm actually calling out to a HTTP call out to Google Map, and I'm actually giving out address and like sort of something like my keys and things that you need to actually interact with Google Map. And then I'm going to receive some kind of content that is in JSON. And what I did is I'm actually marshalling this content. So if you go to the property, you will see that I'm actually using the marshal content where it's actually converting informations from JSON. So I'm using JSON to actually read in the content and get the particular location-wise, like the, latitude and latitude of the location. And then after that, Google is like really hard because I want to give it address and that it tells me what, how many numbers of schools are around, right? It doesn't. It only takes in the locations. So I have to find the location first. Then where's it? Then if you go to the school route, that is almost the same, right? So then I call the where is it? Then I call the Google routes, Google Map again. And this time I ask for a number of schools around. So I search for a place that is school and the radius of, of like how long it's, the radius, around your house and see how many schools are around. So after that, it's not only just that. I need to do a actual appraisal of how much the houses actually cost. That's the most important thing, right? So, so this routes, if you take a look at this routes, it has several bins. So these are the bins that I'm actually, customizing. So these bins are here. So these are the processor bins. And the appraisal processor actually reads in the informations and do the, I don't want you to see my ugly codings, but it's actually just doing the times numbers of schools and calculate the cost and see how many bedrooms it has and depending on the content and just add all the numbers together and it becomes the how much my house is really worth. Okay, so this is, and how do I actually call my bins? It's actually really easy. All you have to do is register your. Is it 40 minutes already? Is that alarm clock? Okay, so all you have to do is register your appraisal processor in here in front of the Camel context, and then you can use this. So I can add another bin here. See, I can add another bin, right? So inside the properties, you get to choose, where I can use my processor, I can use my appraiser, which is I've already defined, and I can call any method that's within, like type anything, then I can actually call the method inside my Camel routes. So that's how you do it. Oops. I think I'm running out of battery. That's why it's so slow. Sorry. So, sorry about that. Okay, this is my first time to talk in America, so I'm nervous. Okay. Thanks. So, I was going to do another example, but we're kind of running out of time. So I want to show you the actual part of deploying the content onto the Fuse Fabric, which is a container. So, so what you can do is actually use the something called a plugin. Okay, where is it? Run as Maven build, and you could type in this. This is called a Fabric 8 deploy, and then if you run it, what it will do is it is going to actually package your Camel application and then store everything into the Maven and then push a profile onto the Fabric. What Fabric is a management tools that is going to handle all the provisioning, managing of containers for you. Okay, so once it's pushed, so this is the Fabric. The Fabric has many views. You could deploy a lot of things on top of this. And inside this, there are a list of profiles. So the profiles are like the application that you have just built. So if you take a look, you'll see that I have actually pushed 4 of my application that I have just talked about. Not the last one. I didn't do the last one, sorry. But all the 4 applications that I have just done. So what I can do is I can actually deploy the content. So I'm actually deploying my content onto a container. So this container is a OSGI Carafe container. So this is OSGI base. We're choosing OSGI because it is really lightweight. Okay, so I'm going to do a cust con. I'm deploying. So what it does is it says that I am actually deploying my content into something called costcon. Then start. 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 So now what it does is now starting all my containers. And just wanted to show you a diagram here. That was my cat. So here you see I'm actually running a Maven Fabricate deploy. So what it does, it's actually creating a bundle. It's packaging it into a bundle. We call it a bundle in our OSGI terms. And then it's going to actually push all the code into a Maven. I hope you can see that, but it's a Maven repo. So in this bundle, it doesn't have any code at all, nothing. It contains only the dependencies that you have inside your bundle. So if you want to check your code and you check the bundle, you'll see nothing because your code is actually in Maven. And inside this bundle, it only has the links to every single one of your dependencies, jars, and where you store your actual code, which is inside Maven. So you see them all inside that bundle. And then what it does, and then after you do deploy, it's going to actually deploy this bundle onto OSGI Karaf. And Karaf will then read all the dependency lists on this bundle, and it will retrieve everything down from the Maven repo. So then you have to make sure that you have the Maven repo ready inside Fuse, so it's actually up and running. Okay? So this is what it does. So let's go back. So what these things are doing here is it's trying to pull down everything, installing everything into my laptop. But I have already put everything in my laptop, so it should run very quickly. And as you can see, I'm actually putting them into separate containers. So if you could put them into different hosts, so it would achieve the distributed way of like what microservices is supposed to give you. So if you go to all these different console, you could see now it is actually you will see the diagrams that it's actually running on. And here, you'll see it's actually running on here. Camel. The diagrams as well. Show you another one.
So you're saying each one of them running a separate Fuse instance?
Yes, correct. And here, Camel. Here you see the whole camera, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to place a XML file into the receiver. So I have actually deployed all the instance, right? And they're all under instance of JBoss Fuse. And the one that is actually receiving all the data are inside datacom, data file. And then I'm going to place all my XML file in here. Then it's going to read everything out, right? See? Now it's running. So there's two of them. Two of them are about customers, and two of them are about houses. And here you see now it's actually receiving one customer information and actually doing the insert and stuff, okay? And it didn't do the appraisal. Oh yeah, it's here. Yeah, see, it's did one appraisal, right? So let's check the database here. Where is my database? Don't want to delete. Here you see that I have two customers, right? One is Christina, one is the correct spell John, okay? And so you see it all running, right? So how do I retrieve the information? Well, that was one of the application I want to show you, but I didn't. I don't have time. 40 minutes is too ambitious. But it was like so what I did is I actually created a web services that is exposing information from John. So here, oops. I need to make sure, oh yeah, that one is different. Oops, I don't have anything. That's weird. Let me see if it's working. Total 3. I don't understand why it's not giving out information. Maybe I didn't do. I have to drag and drop the entire applications for you, but I don't. So my thing is empty, so I don't have any XML file out. But because it's about time that we leave. I have already done it in my blog. So if you Google Christina Fuse, and you'll see all this already done in my blog as well. And I also did every single one of them as a video. I do it from scratch, tell you how to do it, how to do it from scratch and deploy it on the container and see how it actually works. And also show you how the debugging thing I'm supposed to show you today, but I didn't again. Sorry. Okay, thanks very much. Thank you. I hope you enjoy it. Thanks. Oh, if you have any question, welcome to ask me afterwards, okay? Thanks.